The first thing I wanted to say was thank you to JAX for not publishing the instrumental papers that come out, because those all come to us instead, so we very much appreciate that. And the second thing that I would like to say is that I have the unenviable position of presenting the third talk in a session right before lunch. So I will try to make ethics as interesting as possible, but again, it's kind of a dry topic. The first part, I want a little bit of interaction with the audience to try to wake you up. So the first question is whether you've been in these situations. Your work has just been accepted in JAX, as you all know how to get your work accepted in JAX now, right? And so now you want to use a figure in a class you're teaching. How many people have been in that kind of situation? I guess these are all, yeah. I was going to say you're all postdocs or undergraduates for the most part, so maybe not teaching so much in this audience. Your PI asks you to review an article that was sent to her to review, and she tells you to submit the review in her name. Has anybody ever been in that situation? Yeah, I see some nodding, maybe. You've just presented a paper at a conference. You now want to submit it for publication. So it's out there. Can you do it again? Anybody ever been in that? Hands? OK. OK, so you're ready to submit a paper, but you can't reach one of your co-authors. But you know that that person has agreed. So at the end of the month, you submit it anyway. So you want to use a chapter from your dissertation in an article you're publishing. So anybody done that? Yeah. And then you just published your first paper in JAX, and you want to show your family. Everybody likes to show off a JAX paper, right? OK, so if you've been in these situations, so can you do these things? So the first one, with the ACS you can, and with other publishers it depends. So you always want to check. Their website will usually have some information about that on it. The second thing, this is actually against the policy. It violates the confidentiality of the review process. So we know that this is widespread, and we understand that people need to be taught how to review, but you really should not do this.
Jen,
yes?
Go ahead and click the next one.
OK.
Just to make it more interactive. So,
Oh, OK. Sorry.
The answers are popping up. So can you present a paper? If you presented a paper at a conference, is it OK to then submit it for publication?
Well, it's up there now.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
Ah, OK.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, no? I'm trying to wake you up. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, go ahead.
It depends. If you send it, if you're working in polymer chemistry, where every abstract at an ACS meeting is a 4-page, nominally peer-reviewed paper, you can't send it to JAX. Other journals have different policies. If your presentation is filmed at an ACS meeting and the websites are put up, or the presentations are put up on a symposium website, you can't publish it in JAX. If you put this in your dissertation, you can't publish it in JAX. So how do you deal with that? You can ask the people who handle the dissertations to put a hold on your thesis for a year or 18 months or whatever you think is appropriate, so that you haven't violated the journal's policy of publishing work that's already out there. I think our policies are, personally, I think they're overly strict, but they're different for different journals at ACS.
OK. All right. Sorry. I'll make people vote before I pull this up. So you can't reach your co-author in Japan, but you agreed at some point that you were going to submit it for publication. So you submit it anyway. So who thinks that this is OK to do? OK. A good group here. So actually, the answer is no. We have a journal publishing agreement at the ACS, and all of the authors need to be on board with this. And it could be rejected for that very reason. I think that you just addressed this question. You want to use a chapter from your dissertation in an article you're publishing, and I think that that's JAX specific. So
Is there
I think
Oh, yeah.
the journals don't do that.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I know we don't.
Thanks. Are we talking about publishing the chapter the way it is, or reusing the results? I mean, the exactly same words,
What's the
or using the results?
like you can't take the text or you can't take the information?
Take the chapter and you cannot take the chapter and then, rewrite it in a form that's more appropriate for a journal and send it to JAX. Or
You cannot.
At least those are the
Yeah, it's Jack's, yeah.
those are the journal's rules. I shouldn't say this, but I don't think we have any dissertation police. But you're not allowed to do that. But
Yeah.
you can interpret that however you want.
Most people
That's
who
awful.
try to do that will get some kind of embargo on their application so that there's a span where it's not acceptable, so they can then publish the chapter. But the whole point of this exercise is you need to read the journal publishing agreement.
Right.
We've just submitted a new one that authors sign. And the minute you sign that, you agree to certain terms and conditions. You signed away certain rights, keeping others. So we're just trying to demonstrate to you
Yeah.
that most of these things are not
Right.
prohibited.
Right. And again, I think that's journal specific, but
I know you want to keep going, but one of my former students who is a staff member here in chemical sciences, Karen Mulford, did a tremendous amount of work for a thesis, and I couldn't possibly publish it all before she left. And we embargoed her thesis for 18 months so we could, and it put the pressure on me to get going and get her papers out. It was helpful for everyone all around.
so the next point. So you published your paper and you want to show your family. Is it okay to show them a copy or send them a copy? Yes? Yes. So yeah, with ACS, so you can use articles on request. You get a certain number of downloads of your article, 50 free downloads, and you'll be provided with a link when your paper is accepted. And so you can share that with whoever you want. It's kind of the equivalent of getting reprints from back in the day when everything was on paper. Okay, so this is a long list. You submitted supporting information with an article that's been published, and since it's publication, you want to use that supporting information elsewhere. Do you think that's okay? No? Yes? No? So actually with ACS you can. With other publishers again, and if there's any message that comes out of this is make sure that you look at their policies so that you're not in violation of them. You want to use figures and tables from something you've already published in a poster that you're presenting at the ACS National Meeting, and I may have given that one away. But is that okay? Yes? No? Yes? Everybody awake? Yeah, sorry, going back here. Yeah, with ACS you can, but you have to make sure that you're citing it. That'll be a theme in my talk here, is that when in doubt, cite it. And again, that journal publishing agreement that you'll sign with the ACS, you can reuse figures, tables, artwork, illustrations, and text extracts of up to 400 words. And elsewhere, again, it does depend. Yes?
Question, when you're talking about the agreement that you're signing, are you referring to the copyright transfer agreement?
Yes, it's
And I
called
just-
the journal publishing agreement now, as Sarah mentioned. It came out.
Right, and I do want to just remind people that are Argonne employees that you do not have the right to sign copyright transfer agreements yourself.
Yeah.
You should be clearing your paper through publications clearance, and the publications clearance office will sign the copyright transfer agreement on your behalf.
Yeah.
This is a lab regulation or
Government, yeah, it's
rule, and that we encourage everyone to follow.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't think to tailor that to a government audience. Okay, oops, keep doing that. So the article you're writing uses a lot of the same methods as an earlier publication. And so you want to use the same text for the experiments. Can you just copy and paste that? Somebody shaking their head no? Yes? This is a really hard one because there's often only, I'll keep going back. Okay, so there's only so many ways you can say that, we did this reaction, we added this catalyst, we did that. It's a difficult one. Whether you're an author on the earlier paper, this is plagiarism. You can self-plagiarize, and so you have to be careful. There's no just don't copy and paste. Your granting agency requires that you make your work freely available once it's published, and this is actually something that's a big deal in the biomedical sciences now, because NIH is requiring people to deposit their manuscripts so that it is freely available. So how do you do that? Have you been in this situation where you've had to deal with a paper that needs to be open access by the requirements of your granting agency? Yeah. So so ACS has something called author choice. And author choice is something where it's the author pays model. So there are several models for open access, but in this case, that for a fee, you can make your article freely available for anybody to download. And I think Sarah mentioned that those are designated on the website by a red box on the web page. The other thing that we've recently implemented is just accepted manuscripts. So when your paper is accepted, and this is your choice, you make this choice during the peer review process, it will come out on the web. As soon as the editor hits that accept button and it gets sent to our production team, it will be out on the web very quickly, and sometimes within an hour. It'll show up on our just accepted list. And these just accepted manuscripts are unedited. Okay, so basically the way you submit your manuscript, it's going to pop out on the web. It's all an automated process on this list very quickly. And that will remain up until your paper has been edited and formatted by our team in production, which time that'll be taken down, and then the ASAP article will come out. So you want to include something in your manuscript that was published previously in a non-ACS journal. Do you think that you can do that? I mean, I guess, yeah, it's kind of a dumb question. So you have to get the copyright holder's permission. So this is very, very important. And usually, even if you participated in the earlier publication, when you publish something, copyright is transferred to the publisher. And so if you use it again without attribution and permission from whoever the copyright holder is, then that's unethical. And then finally, you submit an article to Jackson, just as, just in case it's not going to be published there, you want to simultaneously submit it elsewhere. Does anybody think that's okay? No, yeah. So again, that is a huge no-no. Do not do this, because again, we talked about that previously. That that really will make the editors mad if they find out. So in order to make sure that you're holding to responsible conduct of research, you have to understand the expectations of all the various groups that are involved in publication. The first is the scientific field and the society, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is the periodic table of the elephants. So this is actually in DC, somebody has painted the periodic table onto an elephant. And so you can kind of think of that as representative of the chemistry field. The funding agencies, NIH and NSF, and again, you're in a government lab, so that's probably a little bit different than would be the case for somebody who is in academia. Your institution and your department, and it sounds like in the government there's actually some extra things you have to go through in order to get your paper approved for publication. Your advisor and your collaborators, you have to make sure that what you submit in their name is what they want submitted. And then the publisher, we have certain expectations for ethics. And then finally, your readers, right? Your audience, they have certain expectations for the level at which your paper is submitted. Okay, so the written word is achieved via peer review, and we've had a pretty good overview of the peer review process. And there are many people involved. Your submission goes to an editor-in-chief. So when it comes to the journal, at least this is the ACS model. Some publishers use different models. It goes through the editor-in-chief. And it varies on how strictly the editors-in-chief review your paper. It depends on the journal. Our editor at Analytical Chemistry reads every paper. He reads every paper that comes in. And there are some that he looks at and it's obvious those are going to be rejected anyway. And he does a triage step at that point. There are some that are rejected without review, but if it's a paper that he thinks would pass muster, or he's not sure, he'll send it to one of our associate editors who is an expert. They have the option to reject it without review. And so at the same time, they make the decision whether to send it out for review. Once they do that, usually they try for 3 reviews, but it's not always possible. And once the reviewers get their reviews back to the associate editor, then he makes the decision, he or she makes the decision on whether the paper will be accepted. So I mentioned expectations, and so I can most specifically speak to the ACS expectations. And so the ACS editors have developed a set of ethical guidelines. And in one of those, so at the beginning of this talk, we passed out 2 editorials that were written by the editor-in-chief of Analytical Chemistry. And one of them has a link in it. So if you need to refer back to this and you want to look at it, the link is in, I think it's in the one called No Ghostwriters in the Sky. So these were developed by the editors. They're for basically all of the parties involved in the review process. And they're reviewed regularly for modification and clarification because there are some issues that are very, very murky and need more discussion at various times. So they take ethics very seriously. So there are obligations that are laid out in these guidelines. The ethical obligations of editors is that they're fair and they're informed and that they're timely. And the decisions need to be unbiased. They need to be confidential. And they're also the link between the authors and the reviewers. The ethical obligations of the reviewers, again, fair, informed, timely. Confidentiality, I mentioned that before, that the person who is reviewing really should be the person who's reading the paper. And then the obligation of authors is to present an accurate version of the work and then have an objective discussion of its significance. And again, we saw that a little bit earlier in a little bit more detail. So there are 2 main types of ethical obligations. Ethical violations, I'm sorry. And one of them is negligence, it's sloppiness. And then the other one is more deliberate. So this is the type where you know it's wrong and you do it anyway. And so there are a list of don'ts that you really want to follow. Do not fail to inform the editor of related papers that you have under consideration, that is, you've submitted 2 at the same time, or that they're in press. One of our other managing editors just had this issue where the paper had been accepted and it was actually just sitting in the last steps before it got sent to production. And there's administrative tasks that have to be done. And they found another paper in that time frame. The paper had already been accepted. And they found another paper that was closely related that hadn't been cited. The reviewers missed it, and they rejected it. Even though it had technically already been accepted, they bounced it back and said, nope, this is an ethical violation, and your paper is not going to be published here after all. Don't falsify your data. That seems like a basic principle of scientific research. Plagiarism is not something you want to do. You want to make sure that you follow the ethical guidelines for human and animal experimentation, and having a conflict of interest is a big deal. And again, the editorial I'll point you to, and if you didn't get a copy of this, I can also send you a link. The No Ghostwriters in the Sky one discusses our editor's point of view about conflicts of interest. So he actually goes into it in pretty good detail about that. So and again, I'd encourage you to take a look at that. So plagiarism. The other editorial, the one that's called There Can Be Shame in Copy and Paste, actually again also discusses plagiarism, including self-plagiarism. And so plagiarism is to use someone else's words or ideas without proper acknowledgement. And again, to avoid it. And as you can see, the theme here is cite the source. No matter what you do, cite the source. When in doubt, cite the source. paraphrase or summarize in someone else's idea and cite the source. Add quotation marks if you're copying and pasting. Put it in quotation marks and cite the source. And unless the information is common knowledge, and again, err on the side of citing. So self-plagiarism, it's when you publish the same work or submit it in 2 different places. And yes, this is possible. And the ACS Ethical Guidelines does have some information on it. This is possibly copyright infringement. Again, when you sign it or when your agency signs this, they're signing copyright over to the publisher. And again, that's the list of things that you can reuse up to 400 words. At least that's the ACS policy, but other publishers have different policies. And you will get caught. Very likely you will get caught because there is software that compares text. They'll often use that to detect both plagiarism and self-plagiarism. Again, yeah, you do get exposed. So scientists are smart people, and they have access to all kinds of tools, including their brains. They have exceptional memories. They have access to lots of different search engines, the software again, and they have access to social networking in which they can call you out in a very public forum. So be very careful. And again, we use technology. There's also image checking software. So there's both something that will compare your words, and it'll also can look at images and see if they've been manipulated. So the consequences. Your paper could be withdrawn, as happened before, as I mentioned to one of the other managing editors. You could be banned. Editors do keep a list of people who have violated ethical standards, and they won't let you publish. And editors of related journals, they all know each other. Our editors-in-chief know each other. And so they will inform each other about authors who have been kind of shady. And once you are allowed back into submitting, you could be put on a watch list, and your papers will be examined. Careful scrutiny before peer review. Oops. I don't think my whole presentation is there.
Well, we should probably wrap up anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where it went. Okay, so thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Or, you know, if you have any right now, I'll certainly be happy to take them. Yeah.
Going back to the issue of...
Oh, I think microphone here. Hold on.
Going back to the paper that was almost out in production, but then they found a reference that was missed.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Going back to the what you mentioned about the paper that's almost out in production is being accepted, but they find out that the reviewers missed a key paper.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the person who wrote the paper also wasn't aware of that, maybe because it was...
No, they had written the paper.
Okay.
Well, it was theirs.
So then in this case, if somebody is not aware that the paper came out within 2 weeks, why is it that we couldn't do something where instead of rejecting the paper completely, you wasted all your time,
Well,
and put a note saying the paper came within the 2 weeks of accepting this paper? And
yeah, I mean, you know, and that's obviously a case that you could talk to the editor, that, you know, if your paper is under review and one comes out, you know, in the meantime, certainly, you know, that's a totally different case than having a paper of your own that you know exists.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I understand
exactly.
that, yeah.
And you know, our editors are reasonable people, so, you know, they make these judgments, and, you know, certainly it's up to them, but they, you know, they're reasonably understanding, so.
Any other questions?
Everybody ready for lunch?
Naive question. When the editors publish their work?
Where?
Yeah, how do they do when they publish? Since they know each other,
Well, they're objective.
how we
right?
can make sure that they don't publish a lot?
Yeah, I mean, you know, our editors do publish in analytical chemistry. They publish other places too. I mean, you know, it gets assigned to another associate editor, and again, it's the reviewers. You know, I mean, the reviewers certainly scrutinize the paper, and if it's not a good one, then it gets rejected.
Anything else? All right, if not, can we just have a round of applause for all of our editors participating today?